The sound of snapping fingers cuts through everything. Server fans, conference room chatter, the hum of a building that never sleeps. When it happens 3 inches from your ear, it's not just a sound, it's a declaration of war. Hey, it guy, Earth to IT guy. I'm Wade Harrison, 48 years old, and I didn't look up immediately. I was staring at a fiber optic routing schematic that would keep the 37th floor from melting down during summer peak load. My finger traced the redundant cooling loop where it intersected with the primary server cluster. Delicate ecosystem of power and glass that I'd personally designed, negotiated, and leased to this outfit 3 years ago. The finger snapped again, faster this time, like a metronome for idiots. I know you can hear me, the voice said. Bryce Caldwell, of course it was Bryce. 26 years old, wearing a fleece vest that cost more than my first car. His job title was Chief Innovation Officer, which meant his daddy was the executive VP of the holding company. Kid had that nervous energy rich boys get when daddy's watching their quarterly numbers. I finally turned in my chair. Can I help you? The Wi-Fi, he said, waving at the glass conference room behind him. 5 other guys in identical vests were staring at a frozen Zoom screen. It's lagging. We're pitching Series B investors in 3 minutes. Fix it. Deep breath. I'm a 48-year-old man in a button-down shirt. I don't wear a lanyard. I don't have a radio clipped to my belt. I was sitting at this conference table because the light was better for reading blueprints, not because I was waiting for help desk tickets. Been managing infrastructure for 15 years since I left the Army. Built communications networks in places where failure meant people died. This wasn't that. I'm not IT support, Bryce. I said, keeping my voice level. I'm reviewing the infrastructure specs for your lease renewal. If you're having latency issues, submit a ticket through the portal. Bryce laughed. Sharp, barking sound like his father made when dismissing board concerns. Excuse me? I don't submit tickets. I tell people to do their jobs. You're sitting here with a laptop, aren't you? Fix the router, reboot, whatever. Just make the internet work. I'm busy, I said, turning back to the schematic, and I don't have admin access to your local network. Wrong thing to say, or maybe the perfect thing. Bryce slammed his hand on the table, rattling my coffee cup. The entire open office went silent. Marketing teams stopped scrolling their phones. Developers quit typing. Even the sales guys paused mid-call. You know what? Bryce shouted, face going blotchy red. I'm sick of attitude from support staff in this building. My father pays a fortune for this lease. I can't even get a stable connection. You're useless. Actually useless. He pointed at the door like some medieval king banishing a peasant. Get out. You're fired. I don't want to see you on this floor again. I'll have HR send your final check. I froze, not from fear but pure scientific fascination. He was firing me. He actually thought he had the authority. Kid was so used to daddy fixing his mistakes, he'd forgotten there were consequences in the real world. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. Dad got the Northwestern housing assignment, room 847 in the engineering dorm. So excited, Northwestern, $68,000 a year. The acceptance letter was still taped to my refrigerator at home. I'd promised her mother before the cancer took her that our daughter would go to the best engineering school in the country. That promise was the only thing that got me through those final weeks in the hospital. I looked at Bryce, looked at the silent office watching us, looked at the folder under my hand, the lease renewal addendum that was the only reason his innovation center had power redundancy. You're firing me? I asked, just to get it on record. I'm firing you, Bryce. Spat. Get your stuff and get out. Now, I stood up, didn't argue, didn't explain that I wasn't an employee of Nextech Dynamics, but rather the independent infrastructure contractor for the entire Skyline Tower. Didn't mention that the IT guy he just screamed at held the master key to the building's central nervous system. 20 years in the Army taught me when to engage and when to execute a tactical withdrawal. I closed my laptop, capped my pen, picked up my leather folder, leaving the unsigned renewal contract sitting dead center on the mahogany table. Contract that would have saved them $200,000 in retroactive utility fees and guaranteed cooling through next summer's heat wave. Copy that, I said, using the military acknowledgement that had become habit. Good luck with your Series B pitch. I walked to the elevator, could feel 60 pairs of eyes on my back, didn't rush, pressed the button, waited for the chime, stepped inside. As the doors closed, I saw Bryce smugly high-fiving one of his vest buddies. He thought he'd just asserted dominance over the help. He hadn't asserted dominance. He'd just severed the artery keeping his business alive. He just didn't know it yet. The elevator ride down was smooth. Skyline Tower prides itself on elevators. High speed, whisper quiet, serviced weekly. I know because I approved the vendor invoices. I stepped into the lobby and nodded to Phil Rodriguez, the security chief monitoring the camera bank. Afternoon, Wade. Phil grunted. Everything good on 37? Not anymore, Phil, I said. Not anymore. 10 minutes later, exactly enough time to walk across the street, order a double espresso, and sit by the window, the chaos started upstairs. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't need to be. I knew the script. I'd written the stage directions. Up on the 37th floor, Earl Martinez walked out of the service elevator. Earl's the building manager. Good man. 62 years old, wears suits slightly too large, sweats when things go sideways. He was carrying a notary stamp and a bottle of champagne. There to celebrate signing the 10-year lease extension I'd spent 6 months negotiating with Thomas Caldwell. Earl walked into the glass conference room. Saw the folder I'd left on the table. Saw Bryce and his team still riding their power trip high. Afternoon, gentlemen, Earl boomed, trying to sound jovial despite the sweat already beading on his forehead. Where is he? Where's our infrastructure wizard? We've got contracts to finalize. Bryce spun around, looking annoyed. Energy drink in one hand, phone in the other. Who? Wade, Earl said, scanning the room like maybe I was hiding behind a monitor. Wade Harrison, he said he was setting up in here. We need to lock down the infrastructure addendum before 5 p.m. or the grandfather clause on your cooling system expires. The grandfather clause, that was the key phrase that should have made every person in that room stop breathing. Legacy cooling rates locked in from when the building was retrofitted in 2018. Without it, their server room would cost $30,000 a month just to keep from melting. Bryce scoffed, grabbing another energy drink from the mini fridge. Kid was already jittery. This wouldn't help. Oh, him. The old guy with the attitude. Yeah, I fired him. The room stopped. Wasn't a quiet stop. It was the kind where air gets sucked out and everyone's ears pop. The developers lowered their headphones. Sarah from HR, who'd been in the bathroom during my termination, walked in just in time to hear this confession. Her face went chalk white. Earl blinked, wiped sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief that had seen better days. I'm sorry, Bryce, you did what? I fired him, Bryce repeated, voice getting that entitled edge rich kids use when they think they're being questioned by the help. He was incompetent. Couldn't fix the Wi-Fi. Gave me lip when I asked nicely, so I told him to pack up and leave. You're welcome, by the way. We need better contractors. Earl stared at him. Stared at the empty chair where I'd been sitting, stared at the unsigned contract on the table like it was a bomb with the timer running down. Bryce, Earl said, voice starting to tremble. Wade isn't a contractor, whatever. He was sitting there with a laptop, like Wade Harrison is the infrastructure director, Earl whispered. Then louder as the panic really set in. He's the independent systems overseer and lease coordinator for the commercial zones. He owns the rights to the fiber trunk you use. He owns the lease on the backup generators. He holds the master service agreement for this entire floor. Earl loosened his tie, sweat really flowing now. I just manage the janitors and coordinate with vendors. Bryce, Wade decides if this building has electricity. He decides if you have internet. He decides if your servers don't cook themselves to death in the summer heat. Bryce's laugh came out, forced, nervous. You're joking. He was just some tech guy looking at a laptop. He was reviewing your renewal contract, Earl yelled, voice cracking. You just fired the person who was about to save you $200,000 in retroactive utility fees and guarantee your cooling through next year's heat dome. The energy drink slipped from Bryce's hand. Didn't break. Just rolled across the floor. Fizzing softly, he looked at the folder on the table. Reached out with a hand that wasn't quite steady, flipped it open. There on the first page in bold Arial font. Infrastructure Service Agreement prepared by Wade Harrison, Managing Director, Skyline Infrastructure Holdings. Oh, Bryce said. Smallest, weakest sound I'd probably ever heard from a Caldwell. He walked out. Earl asked, grabbing the edge of the table for support. What did he say when he left? He said, copy that, Bryce mumbled. Earl closed his eyes like he was praying. Maybe he was, oh God. He accepted the termination of negotiations in military terms. Bryce, you didn't fire an employee, you just terminated your own service contract, and he's ex-Army Signal Corps. When those guys say copy that, it means mission parameters have changed and they're adapting accordingly. Down on the street level, I watched my phone. Text from Earl, please tell me he didn't. Please tell me there's a misunderstanding. I sipped my espresso. Sarah had texted again, Dad, my roommate seems super cool. She's from California, studying robotics. I'm so ready for this adventure. Adventure, Sarah had always been fearless like her mother. Jennifer would have loved seeing our girl this excited about her future. Would have been proud that the promise was being kept. I didn't reply to Earl. The door had closed. The contract was voided. Now I was going to systematically lock every other door in their digital house. My office isn't on the 37th floor. It's on the 4th floor. tucked behind mechanical rooms and freight elevator banks, doesn't have a city view, has a view of backup diesel generators and massive cooling towers that hum with a low vibration I find incredibly soothing. 20 years of military communications had trained me to find comfort in the sound of functioning equipment. This is the brain of the building. Those glass suites upstairs are just decoration. I unlocked the heavy steel door and stepped inside. Cool, quiet, smelled faintly of ozone and expensive paper. Sat down at my desk, sprawling oak slab covered in monitors, and woke up my workstation. I didn't feel angry. Anger's inefficient, messy. Gets you court-martialed or fired or worse. What I felt was professional obligation to honor the contract terms. Bryce had been very clear. He didn't want me there. Didn't want my services. As a professional, I was bound to respect his wishes and adjust operational parameters accordingly. I pulled the Next Tech Dynamics binder from the shelf, 3 inches thick, open to Section 14B, revocable privileges, and shared utilities. Most tenants assume when they rent a floor, they get everything. Water, power, internet, air conditioning. But Skyline Tower's an old building retrofitted for modern tech. Base lease covers 4 walls and a ceiling. Everything else high-speed fiber, dedicated HVAC ace loops, biometric security access, those are add-on amenities. Essentially subleases that building management offers to tenants who need more than basic office space. Bryce had just fired the provider of those amenities. I opened the building management software, my access level, root administrator. Same clearance level I'd held managing communications for 3 forward operating bases. Different uniform, same responsibility. Step 1. Elevator priority protocol. Nextech paid premium for VIP lift access. When a keycard assigned to their floor swiped in the lobby, one of 6 elevators immediately prioritized their call. Shaved 4 minutes off morning commute for their overpaid workforce. I found their service agreement in the database. Contract status currently read active renewal pending. I clicked the drop-down menu, selected terminated by client request, immediate effect. Now they'd wait in line with everyone else. Just like the call center on the 8th floor and the accounting firm on the 15th. Step 2, freight elevator access. They had new servers arriving Tuesday morning, new because I'd personally approved the dock schedule and coordinated with their IT team last month. However, access to the heavy-duty freight elevator required digital authorization tokens issued by the infrastructure overseer. I pulled up their delivery manifest. 18,000 worth of rack-mounted servers, switches, and storage arrays. Essential equipment for their revolutionary AI platform that was supposed to disrupt something or other. I revoked their freight elevator token. When that truck arrived Tuesday, they'd have to carry those server racks up the emergency stairwell, all 36 flights of stairs. Each rack weighed about 200 pounds fully loaded. Should be interesting to watch on the security cameras. My phone rang. Personal line, not the building emergency number. Sarah calling. Hey, Dad. Quick question. My roommate wants to know if you're coming to Parents' Weekend in October. Her dad's some tech executive in Silicon Valley, and apparently he's flying out in his company jet. I smiled despite myself. Tell her I'll be there. Might not have a company jet, but I've got a reliable Honda and a weekend off. You're the best, Dad. Oh, and remember how Mom always said engineering was about solving problems that matter. I think I found my focus area, infrastructure systems, making sure the invisible stuff works so the visible stuff can happen. My chest tightened. Jennifer's words coming back through our daughter's voice. Sounds like you're already thinking like an engineer. Learnin' from the best. Love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart. She hung up, and I sat there for a moment. Infrastructure systems, Jennifer had understood what I did better than most of the executives I worked for. She knew that keeping the lights on was more complex and more critical than any quarterly earnings report. Step 3, climate control. The critical system. Building central air conditioning keeps standard offices at comfortable 72 degrees, but server rooms are different animals entirely. They generate massive heat. Without dedicated chilled water loops, server equipment fries itself in minutes during summer peak loads. That cooling loop was my property, installed and maintained under separate agreement from the base building lease. I pulled up the HVAC control schematics. Flow to Suite 3700 was currently set to high priority minus subsidized rate. Legacy pricing that saved them approximately $25,000 per month compared to current market rates for dedicated cooling. I typed the new command. Standard building rate. Immediate implementation. The valve actuators on the roof would take exactly 47 minutes to adjust. Been monitoring this system for 7 years. I knew every pipe, every sensor, every fail-safe. By tomorrow morning, their server room would be a very expensive sauna. I wasn't sabotaging anything, wasn't violating any laws or breaking any equipment. I was simply removing premium services they'd explicitly stated they no longer wanted from the old guy with an attitude. My landline rang. Only 3 people had this number: building owner, fire marshal, and Diana Walsh, head of legal for the property management firm. Diana's voice was tight when I answered. "Wade, I just got a very frantic call from Earl. He says the VP's son fired you." "Affirmative," I said, putting the call on speaker while navigating to the security badge management system. "Publicly terminated our working relationship. Multiple witnesses." "Jesus Christ," Diana muttered. Then caught herself. "Sorry. Legal training kicks in. What's your current operational status? Implementing termination protocols, rolling back uncontracted premium services, can't provide infrastructure support without valid service agreement. You know the liability regulations better than anyone. I know. I'm not asking you to maintain illegal service arrangements. I'm asking how extensive the system dependencies are." I looked at my monitor, was currently hovering over the biometric access control panel. Nextech's executive wing used fingerprint scanners for their conference rooms, private offices, and executive restroom facilities. "Well," I said, "I hope they've been nice to the janitorial staff. They're going to be using public facilities for a while." "Understood," Diana said, and I could hear her already typing notes for legal coverage. "I'll draft preemptive liability, deflection documentation." "Have a good evening, Wade." "You too, Diana." I executed the access control changes. The beauty of infrastructure is its complete invisibility when functioning properly. You walk through a door, it opens, you breathe air, it's cool, you flip a switch, lights illuminate. You assume these are natural laws of physics, not carefully engineered services provided by professionals who spent decades learning how to make complex systems work seamlessly. On the 37th floor, those natural laws were about to change. It started small. Around 3 p.m., the smart glass conference room walls stopped responding to touch commands. The electrochromic windows that could instantly frost over for privacy during sensitive meetings reverted to their fail-safe state, completely transparent. Bryce was having what appeared to be an increasingly heated conversation with someone on speakerphone, probably his father, based on the body language, and suddenly the entire office could watch him pace back and forth like a caged animal, gesticulating wildly while his voice rose to levels that probably violated their own workplace harassment policies. I watched on the security feed from my office. Silent corporate theater at its finest. Then came the biometric locks. Interior doors separating the developer bullpen from the executive wing were secured by fingerprint scanners. Those scanners routed through my local authentication server. I disabled their account privileges. The doors didn't lock permanently. That would be a fire code violation. Instead, they failed to their safe state, popped open, and refused to latch. Suddenly, the exclusive executive wing was accessible to everyone. Junior interns wandered in looking confused. Sales floor noise flooded into Bryce's formerly private sanctuary. Real panic set in at 4:15 p.m. My dashboard monitors all tenant service tickets. Usually they route to building management, but since the infrastructure belongs to me, I get copied on anything tagged as critical priority. Ticket 6942. Server room temperature alert. Current reading 78 Fahrenheit and climbing. Ticket 943. Executive restroom access denied. Biometric scanners offline. Ticket 944. Network performance critical. Packet loss exceeding 40%. Bryce had called me IT support, didn't understand what his business actually ran on. The fiber trunk they were using was a shared line. Without my traffic prioritization protocols, their bandwidth-hungry AI platform was competing for space with the dental practice on the 8th floor downloading patient x-rays. Their Series B presentation to investors started looking like stop-motion animation. I sat in my office monitoring system status. Temperature gauge for Suite 3700 climbing steadily. 79 degrees, 81 degrees, 83 degrees. Email notification pinged. Message from Bryce. Subject line, system glitch. Hey, the AC seems to be malfunctioning and some doors aren't working properly. Can you take a look? Need this resolved ASAP for our investor calls. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened. Still thought I was on-call technical support. Still expected me to drop everything and fix his problems. I archived the message in a folder labeled Unauthorized Service Requests, Legal Documentation. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Earl sounded like he was hyperventilating. "Wade, he's down here in the lobby screaming at security. Says the building is malfunctioning. He's got maintenance trying to manually override the thermostat controls. Those controls are encrypted with military-grade security protocols," I said calmly. "Hardware locked to the central management system. Good luck with that. He's threatening to sue building management for breach of habitable workspace standards. Standard office lease guarantees 74 degrees for normal business operations. Doesn't cover specialized cooling for high-density server installations. That was a premium service addendum, the one he didn't sign, Earl said weakly. The one his representative explicitly rejected yesterday afternoon, 84 degrees in their server room. Automated thermal protection engaged. Their expensive equipment began throttling processor speeds to prevent permanent damage. The AI platform they were demonstrating to investors slowed to dial-up speeds. While Bryce sweated through his designer fleece vest upstairs, I straightened my collar and walked across the street. Had a dinner meeting to move up, Capitol Grill. The kind of establishment where business gets done over properly aged steaks and handshake agreements worth millions. I was meeting Vincent Pierce, CEO of Omnitech Solutions. Omnitech was Nextech's primary competitor. Solid company, competent leadership, stuck in an inadequate sublet on the 12th floor for 2 years. They'd been desperately seeking expansion space with proper infrastructure capacity. Thomas Caldwell had outbid them for the 37th floor 3 years ago. Vincent stood when I arrived, distinguished man in his 50s, silver hair, treated people with respect regardless of their job title. Wade, he said, firm handshake. Unexpected to hear from you today. I thought Nextech's renewal was routine. Circumstances changed, Vincent. High-priority infrastructure capacity just became available. Immediate occupancy possible. His eyebrows raised. I was under the impression Nextech had a lock on that space. Contract negotiations were terminated by client representative. Effective immediately. Vincent studied my expression. Smart executive, didn't ask for details, focused on opportunity. What kind of capacity are we discussing? Sufficient for your AI development division, dedicated fiber trunk, enterprise-grade cooling, executive amenities. Since the infrastructure is already configured, I can redirect services within hours. Terms: market rate, 5-year minimum commitment, immediate occupancy bonus for expedited transition. Vincent smiled. Wade, if you can deliver that bandwidth by tomorrow morning, I'll sign tonight. Contracts prepared, I said, placing documentation on the table. Services can be rerouted before we finish dinner. We spent an hour reviewing technical specifications. Vincent asked intelligent questions about redundancy protocols and disaster recovery capabilities. Treated me like the infrastructure professional I was, not like technical support. As I signed the final authorization, my phone buzzed. Building alert, unauthorized access attempt, breaker panel 4, floor 37. Desperation had set in. They were trying to reset electrical circuits manually. Everything all right? Vincent asked. Minor legacy system adjustment, I said. Pocketing the phone about that freight elevator slot Tuesday morning, any equipment transfers needed. Actually, yes. We have rack servers warehoused in Newark, waiting for proper facility space. Excellent. I'll coordinate dock scheduling. Walked out with a signed $1.2 million contract. Had just transferred Bryce's premium bandwidth allocation to his biggest competitor. Best part, the fiber cables ran directly through the ceiling space above the 37th floor. Nextech would literally sit beneath the internet speed they used to have, listening to it serve their competition. Monday morning brought the final system lockout. Electronic access cards update their encryption every 72 hours via network connection. Without active network service, security credentials expire automatically. I arrived at 8:45 a.m. 30 Nextech employees crowded the lobby turnstiles, repeatedly swiping dead keycards. Red lights, denial beeps, growing frustration. Bryce looked haggard, same clothes from Friday, unshaven, desperate. He spotted me walking through with my valid credentials. You, he shouted, trying to vault the security barrier before Phil intervened. He's doing this, he locked us out. I paused, turned to address the crowd of onlookers from other companies. Your security protocol requires network authentication for credential validation. Without network service, no valid access. Standard procedure, fix it. Bryce screamed. I have a 9 a.m. appointment with your legal representatives, I said, checking my watch. Are you authorized to negotiate on behalf of your organization? His father arrived an hour later with corporate lawyers. The meeting lasted 12 minutes. They offered double rates, emergency payments, personal apologies. Too late. Omnitech's equipment was already being installed upstairs. 6 months later, I was sitting in that same 37th floor conference room. Vincent was reviewing expansion plans for additional server capacity. Sarah had sent photos from her first engineering lab at Northwestern, studying infrastructure systems design. You know, Vincent said, gazing out at the skyline, I still can't believe they just abandoned a setup like this. Poor leadership, I said simply. They never understood the foundation. Vincent nodded. My nephew starts interning here next month. Smart kid, but thinks he knows everything about technology. I paused, coffee cup halfway to my lips. I told him, Vincent continued. First person he meets is Wade Harrison. Told him if he ever treats you with anything less than complete professional respect, I'll personally ensure his career in tech ends before it begins. I smiled genuinely. He'll do fine, Vincent. As long as he understands how the systems actually work. Sarah's tuition was secure. The promise to Jennifer had been kept. And somewhere in Tulsa, Bryce was probably still waiting for web pages to load. Some lessons aren't taught in business school textbooks. They're learned in moments when respect meets consequence, when experience encounters entitlement, and when the invisible people who keep everything running decide they've had enough. In the Army, we had a saying, respect the expertise or lose the expert. Corporate America could learn from that wisdom. The people who make your world function aren't invisible because they're unimportant. They're invisible because they're so good at their jobs. You never notice when things work perfectly. But when they decide to remind you they exist, you remember real quick who actually holds the power. Next time someone snaps their fingers at the person keeping their lights on, maybe they should ask themselves, what happens when that person walks away?